Welcome to Session 5 of God's Grand Story. If you'll remember, back in Session 4, we talked about Solomon. He was the last king in that united kingdom. He had a half heart for God. And now, in this story in Session 5, after the death of Solomon, his son King Rehoboam begins to raise some very high and unfair taxes on the people. Some of them revolt, and a civil war starts that will leave the united kingdom now split into two nations, a divided kingdom. It will last about 400 years. 10 of the 12 tribes form the northern nation of Israel, while 2 tribes make up the southern nation called Judah. There were 19 kings in the north, there were 20 in the south in Judah. There were absolutely 0 good kings in Israel, but there were 8 good kings in the nation of Judah. Israel was a much worse nation than Judah, and they worshiped Baal idols and the golden calves. Now, this time period is marked by some very good leaders and also some very bad leaders. And what makes the difference? Those who would listen to God and obey Him were the ones that were blessed by God, and hence the nation was blessed as well. This is the time where many prophets speak out against the sin of the people. Prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, Elijah, and Elisha, and many others. Their message was always the same, calling for repentance. At Walk Through the Bible, we call that shape up or ship out. In other words, if you don't obey, God will judge you and your people. The judgment starts with Israel, the worst of the 2 nations. In 722 BC, the nation of Assyria attacked Israel, and they were an amazing, feared nation. The capital was Nineveh. Outside the city gates, there was a stack of human skulls there. They were so cruel. They decimated the nation of Israel. We say scattered, and Israel was no more. The Assyrians that married Jewish women produced a mixed race of people that were called Samaritans, and that's why Jews in the time of Jesus hated them so much. Do you remember a prophet in the Bible as well who one time God said this to him? Go to Nineveh. That's right, it was Jonah. We usually call this story Jonah and the whale. It would be better called Jonah and the city, because the book opens with and talks about a city and it ends with it too. Jonah 1:1, it says this: The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Now, who is this guy? I see myself so much in his life. Jonah is who we often are, a champion of the indifferent, a captain of the apathetic. The model of all who want God, but only on their own terms. And let's face it, we may not find Jonah attractive, but we do find him all too familiar. Remember these words from Jonah as well. But Jonah ran. Do you know that you're either running toward God or away from Him, much like Jonah at the start of the story? And here's an interesting thing as well. Jonah didn't run from God because he was afraid of failure, or because he was afraid of the fear of the ruthless Ninevites. He ran because he was afraid of success, that God might just actually love and have mercy on these wicked people. He hated them with all of his being. The question I have when I read this is, what people group do you tend to avoid as well? Back in Babylonia in 586 BC, they had now been conquered by Assyria. And they came down to go to war with Judah, but with a different strategy than that of the Assyrians. Their idea was this: let's carry back the cream of the crop people, the smart, the rich, the beautiful, and the talented. And that's how Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got there too, as well as Daniel. How long were they there? A short time in God's eyes, but a long time for human beings, 70 years. This was prophesied in Isaiah 44 and 45. It says this in verse 13 of chapter 45. I will raise up Cyrus in my righteousness. I will make all his ways straight. He will rebuild my city and set my exiles free. Back in Babylonia, King Belshazzar, the new king, had a great feast. And a man's hand appeared out of nowhere and began to write on the wall, and this absolutely stunned the crowd. The message said that the empire would fall very soon and come to an end. And within days, the Persian Empire fought and defeated the Babylonians. The new king, Cyrus, allowed the Jews that wanted to go back home and to return to Israel, back to the promised land. It had been so long since they as a people group had been in their homeland, and now it was time to go home. You know, sometimes I get in a hurry with God and pray almost like this expression, ASAP. God, please hurry up and meet my timetable as soon as possible. If you're like me, maybe we should be praying ALIT. I'm going to pray as long as it takes. His time is not our time. You know, as a pastor, I deal with people each and every week who struggle with the timing of God. A young couple comes to me and says, we can't get pregnant. Where is God? A person comes to me and says, my mother has cancer and she's had it for 2 years. Will God really ever heal her? A person's been without work for a long period of time and wonders, where is God? Now, the question I have for you is, what about you? What circumstance or situation are you facing in your life where you're beginning to doubt or not fully understand the timing of God? Discuss that and pray for each other in your group. And then we ask that you join us next time as we finish up this amazing series and story called God's Grand Story.